Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be with you again today, and also it's good to see some of my friends and brethren who were having such a good time at the feast that they decided to extend the feast another week. And it's not without precedence, because we recall that in the Old Testament that they had such a good time at the feast that they decided to extend it to another week. So I am glad that you didn't decide to extend it 2 more weeks, or else I would not see you. So it's really good to see you and to be with you and to share with you today. It's always a pleasure to be in God's house and to share with God's people. And you know, today is no exception. Indeed, today is, I believe, the second Sabbath after the feast. And I think we're still reminiscing on the great time we had at the feast. And it's always good, because the feast is always find a way to sort of refresh our minds and to rejuvenate us. It's always good to be at the feast, particularly when we are sharing with brethren who are of like mind, and we have the messages and the songs and the entertainment and so on. It's always good, and I believe that we get the balance here. Not only do we have services and songs and messages, but we also find time to share with each other and to have some fun, to bring a balance, because the word said that we should be joyful at the feast. And there's a reason why we are asked to set aside 10%. I understand some people teach it as a law, but others take it as a principle, the principle of saving towards the feast and so on. So it's really good to be with you again today. Last week I talked about the matter of maintaining the enthusiasm we had at the feast, because many of us come back from feast year after year, and we are on a high, just as the children of Israel were when they left Egypt. But if we do not put into place a program, then we are not going to be able to maintain focus and to maintain that enthusiasm. And so we shared a bit about what we need to do to maintain the enthusiasm, things that we need to structure into a program that will enable us to continue to grow and to deal with the challenges. Because as I had said then, that the message of the feast is one of faith. The children of Israel were supposed to have faith in God, and they had seen miraculous demonstrations of God's power. But yet still, weeks after the feast, after that excitement, they rebelled against Moses and Aaron. And even when they got food, they got tired of it and said, "Oh, I'm tired of this same food over and over." And as the word said, the children of Israel's experience really serve as an example to us. And we should take something from that experience, because we can find ourselves lacking in faith as well. So the things that we need to do to structure in programs that will help us, but also to structure out programs, things that will not help us, things that will hinder us, and so on. And we talked a bit about that last week. But today I want to share with you about a matter that I think is critically important. Even to ponder it takes a lot to even ponder and to think whether or not you arrive at the right answers. What I would want to share with us about, brethren, is the matter of deception. Deception. If you would turn with me to Exodus 14. Exodus 14 and verse 10. We are still on the Feast of Tabernacles theme, And this is a sort of follow-up to the message last week. And you will see more clearly as I get more into the message. But Exodus 14 and verse 10, it reads, "As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, 'Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have brought us to this desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert.'" So this was shortly after the sojourn out of Egypt, after the Israelites left Egypt. But if you were there, what would have been your response? Imagine that you were part of that, some estimated at 2.5 million persons marching through a desert in which there were no water, in which food was rationed, and you are faced with this situation. You're just coming out of Egypt. What would you have done? What would have been your response? Would you be among those who say here, it would be better for us to have died in Egypt? Would you be among those? Would I be among those who respond that way? Exodus 17. We're going to be in the Old Testament a little bit. Exodus 17. We are on the matter of deception. And the point I hope to make is that the Israelites were deceived in thinking that God would not have been faithful even amidst the trying circumstances. It was a question of lack of faith. They were deceived in believing that God would not have come true for them. Exodus 17 and verse 1. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there and grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" Then Moses cried to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." Imagine the excitement that they left Egypt with. But now in the desert, when they faced these conditions, they were ready to stone Moses, as he said. They grumbled against Moses. Grumbled. If only we had died. Exodus 16 mentioned the same idea. If only we had died in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate food we wanted, but you have brought us into this desert to starve this entire assembly. That's Exodus 16 and verse 2 to 3. They were saying that they were being starved. Numbers 11 and verse 1 to 6 again make that same point. Numbers 11 and verse 1 makes that same point. Now the people complained about their hardships in the hearing of the Lord. And when he heard them, his anger arose. So here was it, that these same people that God took out of Egypt, they were complaining to the extent that God's anger arose. Then fire came from the Lord, burned them. Then fire came from the Lord, burned among them, and consumed some on the outskirts of the camp. When the people cried out to Moses, he prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So the place was called Taberah, because fire came down from the Lord, had burned among them. The rabble with them began to crave for food. And again the Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers and melons and leeks, onions and garlics. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. So even the manna that they got, they begin to quarrel about the manna. Every day is just manna. But I want you to notice something here in this. And I deliberately read through this entire thing because it seems similar to the other text in Exodus. If you notice, that Moses had to save the people. He had to intervene to save the people from themselves. In the earlier part of Numbers 11:1, it was Moses' intervention that caused God to stop the fire from consuming the people. So the people had to be protected against themselves. It's an important thing to remember. Remember, we're talking about deception, you know. I'm still on deception, but I'm laying a background. Sometimes, and I hope to make this point, sometimes we are going to have to be protected from our own selves. So don't believe that I have everything and you have everything that pertain to walking straight. Sometimes we are going to have to be saved from ourselves. We see it right here. Because we are in such a state that we are unable to save ourselves from it. Moses intervened and saved the people in this particular case, or else God would have consumed them. And I make the point that sometimes others have to intervene for us to save us from ourselves. Number 16 again make that same point. Number 16 makes that same point. The next day the whole assembly grumbled against Moses and Aaron. You have killed the Lord's people, he said. You have killed the Lord's people. You're a murderer. But when the assembly gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron, he turned towards the tent of meeting. Suddenly the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared. Then Moses and Aaron went to the front of the tent of the meeting, and the Lord said to Moses, get away from this assembly so that I can put an end to them once and for all. This was what God said. I've had enough of your rebellion. I've had enough of your complaining. Why don't you trust me? You have seen what I've done to the Egyptians. You sang songs about how the Egyptians were covered in the Red Sea and they were consumed and they had no more. You sang with Miriam these songs of praise. But now you are complaining. I'm going to put an end to you. God said, get away that I may put an end to them once and for all. And so Moses fell face down. Then Moses said to Aaron, take your censer and put incense in it, along with fire from the altar, and hurry to the assembly to make atonement for them. Wrath has come out of the Lord, and plague has started. So Aaron did as Moses said, and ran in the midst of the assembly. The plague had already started among the people, but Aaron offered the incense and made atonement for them. He stood between the living and the dead, and the plague stopped. But 14,700 people died from the plague, in addition to those who died because of Korah. You remember Korah's rebellion. Then Aaron returned to Moses at the entrance of the tent of the meeting, for the plague had stopped. The same point we made earlier on. It was Moses who had to intervene to save the people from themselves. And it's going to happen to us. Sometimes others are going to have to save us from ourselves. That's an important point I want us to make. What would have been your response if you were there? You have seen all of these miracles, but then you're faced with thirst. There was no water. There was no food. Would you be among those who said, man, I think it would have been better off in Egypt? Forget about God's goodness. Hebrews 3 and verse 12. We're still talking about deception. Hebrews 3 and verse 12. Because I believe that coming out of the feast, where we talk about our tabernacling on earth, it is similar to the experience of Israel as they tabernacled in the wilderness. This is our tabernacling. So that was the Feast of Tabernacles was a type of what we are living out daily in our daily lives. We have learned that in the literature. So that is just a small synopsis of what we're supposed to be saying in our own daily walk. Hebrews 3 and verse 12. See to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God, but encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. We have come to share in Christ if we hold firmly to the end the confidence we had at first. As has just been said, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in rebellion. Who were they who heard and rebelled? Were they not all those whom Moses led out of Egypt? And with whom was he angry for 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the desert? And to whom did God swear that they would never enter his rest, if not to those who disobeyed? So we see that they were not able to enter because of their unbelief. Unbelief or lack of faith. The walk is a walk of faith. Israel did not enter the promised land because they lacked faith. They did not believe that God would sustain them through the difficult times. And we're going to face our own thirst. We're going to face our own hunger in this desert that we are traveling right now. Hebrews 4 and verse 1. Hebrews 4 and verse 1. I believe Hebrews really allude to the experience of the children of Israel, particularly Hebrews 3 and 4 and so on. It's really alluding to that. It's almost a quote, I think, from that. Today, if you hear his voice, it's actually a quote from the Old Testament. Hebrews 4 and verse 1. Therefore, since the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you will be found to have fallen short of it. For we also have had the gospel preached to us just as they did. But the message they heard was of no value to them, because those who heard it did not combine it with faith. After all of that, brethren, I'm saying to us that we can be deceived by the deceitfulness of sin. You know, part of the tragedy is that I don't think sometimes we fully appreciate how deceitful sin is, how deceptive it is. And you know, the interesting thing is that it is frightfully easy to fall into deception. Easy to be deceived. But what is even more frightening is the fact that a person who is deceived is completely unaware of it. It's easy to fall into deception But more frightening, the person who is in deception is not aware of it. Some of you might have experienced this or might have known of persons who are in love. And you might say to them, say, boy, I don't think this person is the right person for you. I think you should think about it again. Or I think you should delay, or whatever the case might be. But you see something that raises a danger sign, and you say to the person, no, I don't think you should go through with this. I think you should wait a while or get counseling or something. And the person will tell you, oh, no man, you're missing it. This is the most wonderful person in all the world. Loving eyes, they say, can never see. Loving eyes, as the song goes. Loving eyes can never see. And sometimes, the more you try to say to the person, no, you're seeing the person doing A, B, C. No, it's because you hate the person. Why are you saying all these things? Not because it is objectively true that the person has these faults. But it's because you don't like them. Loving eyes can never see. So it is with deception. So this person is deceiving into believing that this is the most wonderful person in the world. And the more you talk, the more you say to them, no, I think the more they're doubling down. Rather than taking a step back and looking at it objectively, is the more they're going to double down. So if you really want to perhaps help persons in those situations, is perhaps not be so aggressive in saying to them, boy, these are the problems, because they're going to double down. It's the same problem here. When you're unaware of it, you're just unaware. And sometimes it's after going through it, after a while, it begins to sink in that what you were saying from the beginning, it was true. The person was deceived. Love blinds. Love blinds. Deception. It's easy to fall into. And also, when you're deceived, you don't know it. How do you prevent being deceived? It's really a frightening question. It's really a frightening question. Because you could be deceived and don't know it. You could be deceived in a certain matter and don't know it. It's really frightening to the Christian, to the serious Christian. It's something that we ought to ponder continually, because we can easily slip into it. And later on, as I develop, you begin to see some of the things that I'm talking about. I talk about the person in love, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later on. But, brethren, I want us to look at some categories and some factors that work against us to make us not obey God. I want us to look at some categories of factors that contribute to our deception. And don't believe that because we are now baptized and we have God's Spirit that we can't be deceived. No. The person who believes that they can't be deceived, why I tell you, that person is perhaps deceived already. If you believe it can't happen to you, that's a sad case. Because you will do nothing to try to escape the deception. Because you believe it can't happen to you. It can't happen to me. It can't happen to me. I can't be deceived. I'm so bright. I'm so brilliant. I know God's word. I read the Bible from Genesis to Exodus. I can quote you any text, any verse, whatever the case may be. I can quote you. I can't be deceived. Once you have that mindset, chances are you are well in danger zone. So I want us to look at three categories of factors that contribute to this deception. John 15 and verse 19. That's the first category that I want us to look at. And here I'm hoping to bring out the ease with which we can be deceived. How easy it is to deceive. I'm hoping to bring this out more clearly in this section here. John 15 and verse 19. If you belong to the world, it would have loved you as its own. But as it is, You do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. The world system is set up in such a way that it's not in our best interest. Society is not set up for the Christians, not set up for us. Because we are always going to have to be battling society's values. It's always a battle with society. That's why the world hates you. The world system is against us. Right now, it is becoming more difficult for a person to preach God's word. In the States here, in Canada, certain topics are, you can't go on the air and say it. If you talk about it, it's perhaps hate language. So truth now becomes relative in those contexts, and people talk about finding your own truth. And that is very popular because it sounds as if you are, you're not a bigot. But if you're going to be saying God's word means what it says, you're going to be in problems. Or this is what God's word says and is intended to be interpreted literally, they're going to say no. And they're going to say that you're a bigot. The world systems against us. So if you're to go on certain television stations, you'll not be allowed on the stations. Because you won't be allowed to say that those who don't keep God's Sabbath are not going to make it into God's kingdom unless they repent. Or unless, of course, we talk about they are not among the called right now. But those who are who know and deliberately break God's Sabbath, they're not going to be in God's kingdom. It's going to be seen as if you are throwing stones and you're hating. You're not preaching love. And what the world talk about nowadays is love. Love, love, love. Love without rules, love without law. Once is love. A lot of things justified in the name of love. But we are going to look at some things a little bit later on. So we see the world is set up against us. Sometimes to get time off from work for Sabbath or for holidays or for feasts is really a challenge. And once a person knows that you're going to keep God's day, they are likely to say no. Because that's not important. What is a day? You can go the next day or next week. It's really not important. Perhaps if you say to them, no, I have an emergency, I have a family who is sick and I need to be there, they perhaps will give it time off. But if you say, just like how the children of Israel found with Pharaoh, oh, I want to go into the wilderness to serve God. Then I said, no, man, none of that. Stay and work. You're lazy. That is how the world is set up against us. But I want to show you something even more frightening. Proverbs 16. So we see the world is set up against us. The world system is set up against us. Proverbs 16 and verse 2. All a man's ways seem innocent to him, but motives are weighed by the Lord. All a man's ways seem innocent to him. It's innocent. There's no problem here. It's all good, as they would say. I think you have the saying over here. You understand the saying. It's all good. Innocent to him. But motives are weighed by the Lord. Still in Proverbs 16, but verse 25. Proverbs 16 and verse 25. There is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. There's a way that seems right to a man. So things can seem right to us. That's when we are deceived. It seems right. We don't see the wrong in it. It seems right to us, but it can lead to death if we are not careful. I don't think you have to turn. There's an oft-quoted text, Jeremiah 17 and verse 9. The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? It's a text that I think we are well familiar with. It's said over and over in some of the literature and so on. The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? And it's not somebody else's heart, it's our heart. Each of us, our heart, are deceitful. So what we have the world working against us. We have our very selves working against us. Because the heart is deceptive. It can deceive us easily. The heart itself, which is supposed to be the one that guides, it is propelling us in the wrong way. It can deceive us. And as we go on later on, we're going to see some of that. So we have the world, and we have our very selves. Remember the children of Israel, the Israelites, that they were deceived. They were working against their own best interests. Moses had to intervene. But then we have the third category. First Peter 5 and verse 8. 1 Peter 5 and verse 8. 1 Peter 5 and verse 8. We have the world against us. We have our very selves against us. And thirdly, we have the devil against us. The devil against us. 1 Peter 5 and verse 8 reads, "Be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." So we have the devil seeking to devour us. Your enemy the devil prowls around. He's just going around to see who he can snatch. If you have seen the case, perhaps if you watch like some of these movies, not really movies, but your nature programs that show your animals in the wild, and you will see a stalker watching for the lamest one to attack. So he will not attack the one that is fiercest, but he prowls around and looking for the weakest one. And I was watching that program the other day, and it was these birds that migrate, and one got lame from the journey, and in the whole process, the prey just looked for the lamest one, and he was unable to fly or to run and so on, and he just sink his beak into him, bam, 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 until all the flesh came out. That's how the devil is. Prowl around. That's why in Ephesians 6 and verse 11 to 12 it says, "Put on the full armor of God, that you can take your stand against the devil's trick." Because he's out to deceive us. He's out to get us. He tried it with Jesus. He was unsuccessful. He tried it with others and he's successful. So we have these three against us. The world is against us. How the world is set up. It's set up not really for the Christians. We have ourselves against us, but we also have the devil against us. What a combination! What a combination for us to battle. If it were only that you had the devil and the world against you, then you could say, "Well, I have myself. At least I could put up a fight." But as it were, our own selves are against us. And the reason why ourselves are against us is because we are wired not so much for righteousness, but we are sort of hardwired to avoid pain and to embrace comfort. That's the problem with us. That is the problem with us. We are wired to like pleasure. We like pleasure. Nobody likes pain. They might tolerate some degree of pain, but we like pleasure. But boy, don't we hate pain? Pleasure and pain. I'm going to look back at that later on. But I want us to look at something as we continue on this. You see, some of the things I've heard it said, I think in one of Ron Dart's tape, he heard this minister saying, "Oh, I'm going to walk the devil's tail tonight." And we believe that we can outsmart the devil. I came across a phrase that says sometimes we tempt the devil. We test God But as you heard, the children of Israel tested God in the desert. We test God too. But also we tempt the devil. I don't know if you ever see a cartoon in which the mice coming through the hole in the floor, and there's the cat there ready for him, and each time he just try to come out and to shift and play with the cat. He's actually tempting the cat because the cat's objective is to try and get him. And no, he's trying to run out and play with the cat. But the cat is out to get him. And I believe that sometimes we do it. We're talking about deception, you know. We're talking about deception. Sometimes it happens to us. We underestimate the devil. But I want us to look at some things very quickly. The first thing to note is that the devil belongs to a higher order being than us. We see that in Hebrews 2 and verse 6. We say that we were made a little lower than the angel. The devil being an angel of light that guarded God's throne, he's a powerful super being. Much higher than us. Constitutionally, he's superior than us. So we have somebody who is brighter than us, more powerful than us, fighting against us. That's the first. Jude 9 talk about when the archangel Michael was disputing about the devil, about Moses' body. He did not bring a slanderous accusation against him, but said, the Lord rebuked you. So powerful was he that he didn't attack them directly and so on. He said, the Lord rebuke you. I put you to the Lord. Let the Lord rebuke you. But person saying, oh, I'm going to wag the devil's tail. So the devil is powerful. But also, the devil has a greater experience than us. He's around longer than us. Longer than we'll ever be in this life. So he has a lot of years experience. A lot of years experience. He has managed to fall several giants over the years. You hear this saying about persons who have different personality type. And I don't remember how many the psychologists say there are. But you talk about personality types. But the devil knows all the personality types. He has slain persons with our personality type before. He said, oh, it's Butterman. I can do this. Because he has the experience. We are not that experienced. He finds way, he knows a weak spot. Remember we talk about the pain and pleasure? He knows that. Don't think he don't know. He knows that we don't like pain and that we like pleasure. He's going to exploit that. He has greater years of experience. But one of the important things I think we need to realize in 1 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians 11. I think it's an important thing that we need to look at. And know that we are saying greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. I know we're going to say that, and that is true. But the point I would want to make, when you are saying all of that, is that those persons who fell had greater in them than is in the world. So it is no comfort necessarily in saying that we have God on our side. Remember last week I talked about how we are going to survive is going to be dependent on our responses. Because if it were left to God alone, all of us will be safe. Every single one of us. None will be lost. But yet still, some are going to be lost. We don't teach universal salvation. Some are going to be lost. Is it that God's power is limited and can't reach them? No. God's power is always there. But what is going to make that difference is not so much God's power, but how we utilize God's power. The decisions we make. This is going to be the decisive factor, not really God's power. Because God's power is there for all who fell. Everyone who have fallen, God's power was there for them. But unless we tap into God's power, in terms of the decisions we make, we are going to be deceived and we are going to fall. I want us to look at this story that I'm talking about. 2 Corinthians 11 verse 13. For such are false apostles, deceitful workmen, masquerading as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It is not surprising then if his servants masquerades as servants of righteousness. Masquerade as angel of light. The devil is able to transform himself to look like an angel of light, look like the real thing. And remember, in Isaiah 14 and verse 12, you don't have to turn there, but those who might be writing can make reference to this. Isaiah 14 and verse 12 to 14. That Satan wanted to set up a rival rule to God's government. That is his goal. He wants to set up a rival kingdom to God's kingdom. And he will try to do everything he can to ensure that his kingdom succeeds. In verse 14 he said, I will ascend above the tops of the cloud. I will make myself like the Most High. Not unlike, but like the Most High. So his effort is to counterfeit God's kingdom. That is what it's about. To make a kingdom of counterfeit. And you know the thing about counterfeit? Counterfeit is not unlike the original. Not unlike the genuine. It is almost like a good counterfeit. It's difficult to take. Some of us will take a counterfeit and not know it, unless we are meticulous in trying to find out some aspects of the genuine that are not in it. It's easy. It can look alike. It look alike. That is the problem. No one will say to us, let us go and worship the devil. A person will not say that. Come, let's go and worship the devil, man. The God is against the devil and so on, and he knows that he's a good one and he's this and this. Let's go worship the devil. A person will not come to us and deceive us in that way. But he will say to us, the Sabbath is not important. God's law is not important. All that is important is for us to live good with our neighbors and our friends. Just be kind and gentle and nice to your neighbors and friends, but the others are not. The other things are not important. They just divide and so on, and it sounds good. That is how we'll be deceived. Because in God's law, there is that to say we are to do good to our neighbors and our friends. There is that in God's law. But it is more than that. It is not just doing good to neighbors and friends, but it's doing more than that. I want to now to turn to look at how the devil might counterfeit the real thing. I want us to look a bit on that. You know, sometimes the devil uses direct opposition, as we see in 1 Thessalonians 2 and verse 18, where Paul wanted to be with some brethren, but Satan stopped him from going. 2 Thessalonians 2 and verse 18 to 19. Satan can act in a direct way against us, as he did with Paul. So direct opposition. You remember the Bible talked about when Daniel prayed and God answered the prayer and dispatched an angel to him. But it took what, 21 days it was, for the angel to reach. I think Michael had to intervene because the angel coming to Daniel to talk to Daniel was detained by Satan, so that the message didn't reach. It's the same thing here. The same thing. That he can act in a direct way against us. And sometimes he does. But another way in which he operates is he uses deception that is clothed in truth. Deception clothed in truth. Just a little twist of the word You remember in the Garden of Eden? He said, you're not surely die, man. You be like God's, man. Don't just eat, man. Don't worry about him. He don't want you to be like him and so on. He just turned the word a little bit. The same thing with Jesus. When he tempted Jesus, he just turned some words a little bit. Deception clothed in truth. I want us to turn to Colossians 2. Colossians 2. So we talk about direct opposition. That's the way he come against us. But also deception clothed in truth. He said, see to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the basic principles of this world rather than on Christ. In order to trick many, Satan and his ministers will not say, as I said before, come let's worship. He will not say, come let's worship. He will say things that sounds good, but it's not the full story. He will give a half-truth as we hear the term used. He will not give you the full story. Just enough error in it to get us off track. Just enough error. Just slight turn on it. And we are lost. You know, I sometimes use install satellite dish, and to track and to log on to that satellite that is about 22,000, 23,000 miles in space. If you are out by just a fraction, you know, even less than a centimeter, if you're out by that, you might miss the satellite by hundreds of miles. Hundreds of miles. Just a little bit is enough. Somebody talk about a little bit of arsenic in drink is enough to poison. It's not the full drink. You're going to be deceived by it. That's the same thing here. So deception clothed in truth. And again, there are various ways in which the devil tried to deceive. Look at all the churches that exist. All of these churches that exist. They still preach about Christ. They still preach about love and doing good. But still they are deceived. We can fall into that deception if we're not careful. I believe one of the errors that caused the worldwide church, one of the largest members of the body, to go astray was a simple question a person asked, what about all those good persons in the Sunday churches? You mean that they won't be saved? And it looks hard to say that these good people, because listen, there are upright and moral persons in these churches. Upright and moral. Even more than some of our leaders. They couldn't answer. Because it was hard to say, no, they are not going to be saved in their Sunday churches. It was difficult. So they tried to change it. Well, the Sabbath is not that important, because since Sabbath is making a distinction, the Sabbath is not really important. But because what is important is that these people love God and so on and so forth. We see this thing happen over and over. Deception clothed in truth. But another thing too. The third level of deception is deception clothed in the good. So we can have deception clothed in truth, but we can have deception clothed in good. And man, is this hard to figure out. Because there's going to be a good that you can point to. But it is not God's will perhaps, or it is not good enough. And so you'll find that we find ourselves trying to go after a thing and say, oh, it's all good here and so on, but we are deceived. Remember that what I said earlier, that Satan is about counterfeiting God's kingdom and God's rule. It's not unlike, it is similar to. So you're going to see some similarities, and you're going to look and see some similarities in some of the arguments, some of the positions. But it is similar only enough to deceive you if you are not careful. Deception clothed in good. In Matthew 4 and verse 1 to 11, you don't have to turn there. But when the devil tempted Jesus and said, man, won't you make some food? You're hungry. You have been fasting for 40 days. Why don't you eat some food? You can create some food and eat. Certainly he could have done it. It was a good thing to eat food to get the strength so that he can do the work. And that is a good proposition. Straighten yourself, man. Make some food and eat, man. You can do it. You straighten yourself so that you can do the mission. That's a good argument. It sounds good and it sounds reasonable. But if Jesus had done it, he would have despaired of God's goodness. God's goodness. Just like the children of Israel who disobeyed because they did not believe that God could protect them and God could feed them and God could sustain them, the same thing would have happened here. But Jesus said, no. If it means that I have to die, I'll die. So Jesus passed a test. Because even up to the point where he was, after he finished the temptation, he almost, angels, they said, had to come and minister to him. So he was obedient there, even meant his death. He was going to obey God. He was going to obey God. He was not going to go that way. Deception, clothing good. Also, you remember Miriam said to another era, as we talk about deception, clothing good, is we talk about food early on. We talk about recognition. Everybody wants some recognition. Nobody wants to feel as if they are nobody. They all want recognition. Miriam and Aaron, they said, Moses, you believe that is you alone that God talked to? But God talked to me just like you. I can do just as you are doing here. Why are you holding on to power? And so on. Why are you doing these things? I talk to the Lord too. I can do it. Because they wanted recognition. But what happened? Miriam came down with leprosy. Moses had to intervene again on her behalf. The danger is not so much in the recognition, but sometimes we can tempt God in terms of the things that we do. It is not for us to do certain things, then we ought to leave it alone. Recognition can be a problem in many institutions. Many companies fall because you have some person there who are overambitious and want certain recognition that they are not getting, and they do anything to get that recognition. The organization crumbles. The pleasure of recognition. But also Miriam, we wanted power. Power is a thing, you know. There is a saying that absolute power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We've heard it. In the United States here, they came up with what they call a separation of powers, in which you had three branches of government, so that the president by himself can't legislate, and bring things into effect. It has to go through the Congress, and and also the court has to see whether or not the law is constitutional. And so we have all these checks and balances, we understand all these things. But sometimes power can corrupt. In Matthew 4, in the same temptation of Christ, the devil tempted Jesus to say, I will give you all the power of this world. I will give you recognition, I will give you power. All this is yours if you just follow and worship me. But Jesus said, I will not be alienated from my Father. I will not dishonor my Father by worshiping you, because only my Father is deserving of worship. I will not worship you. And the devil flee. So we ought to be careful, brethren, in terms of looking even at the good, because even the good, there can be deception. And this is part of the test for us. That not because the thing sounds good or looks good, we ought to dig a bit deeper to see whether or not it is really genuine. But the fourth that I would want to look at is deception stemming from pressure. Deception stemming from power. You know, one of the devil's greatest way in deceiving us is that he applies pressure on us in various ways. All of us have certain pressures. The pressures might be different. The The pressures might be different, but pressure nonetheless. Remember I talked earlier about our being wired to avoid pain and to embrace pleasure. That's how we are wired. So when the devil put the pressure on us, it is going to test us to see what is in our heart. It's the same thing that Jesus did when he took the children of Israel, not through the shortcut, but through the longer road. He said, I want to see what's in your heart. I want to see if you will love me nonetheless. Even in difficult times, you'll be there. Pressure. Pressure changes our perception. Pressure changes our perception. You find to know a person who is not under pressure. They will talk plain and straight and give you the text and say all the right things. No, Sabbath, it's no matter a person ought not to break the Sabbath. You ought to be in church. You ought to do all of these things about the Sabbath. But when a person's come under pressure in keeping the Sabbath, then you're going to hear a different story. Pressure. Person sing a different song. All of a sudden, the Sabbath is not so absolute again. And I'm just using the Sabbath. It could be many other things. I'm just using the Sabbath because, we are Sabbath keepers. I'm just using the Sabbath as a principle to show, but it's applicable in other areas of our life. It's not only Sabbath that we can be pressured by. We can be pressured by other things. I understand that the Adventist, I believe, wrote a letter to its leadership to say that if a deacon can maintain his position in the church, if he works on Friday night, provided that he come to church on Saturday morning, because what is important is not that he worked and break the Sabbath at Friday evening, but that he's in church to hear what is going on in church. So no man, don't worry yourself. Once you come to church, you're quite all right. You can work before. You can even take your jacket and stuff to work, and after work finish, you just put on your clothes and you come to church and you're good. Pressure reach. Because of the economic climate right now, and a lot of persons are pressured in keeping the Sabbath. And so a compromise is worked out to say, boy, I don't want to lose my flock. So I want to give some sort of leeway for them to move because I understand the pressure. And so they came up with a compromise. All you need to be is in Sabbath services. So you could go immediately, if we started, let's say 10 o'clock and finish at, say, 1, you could go to 3 o'clock work because you were in service. That's what they come up with. Deception. Pressure. And pressure can come by us stepping out of God's will. Or maybe others not doing God's will in us. Because, as you remember, that the man who Paul put out of the church because he had an affair with his father's wife. Paul says, in order for the devil not to deceive, restore this man, because he can be so remorseful that he fall into temptation and believing that he can't do it. So sometimes it is left to us to help others to make it back. Because when a person is falling, it is not for us to glee and to gloat, but for us to work patiently, lovingly, to restore that person. The Bible says that. When a brother is falling, restore him gently. But look to yourself, because you can be deceived. It's always a challenge for us. I'm saying all of this, and I've gone through it in a sort of long way to show how easy it is for us to be deceived. Because the person who is talking in a state of calm is not the same person who is talking in a state of under pressure. Not the same person. The thinking begin to change. The perception begin to change. Not the same person. But I want us to look at another deception. Deception clothed in strong emotions. Deception, this is the fifth one. Deception clothed in strong emotions. You know, God made our emotions. And He made it for a reason. But our emotions can lead us astray. And this is where a lot of us fall because of strong emotion. Remember earlier I talked about the person in love. This was a strong emotion of love. And boy, this is the most wonderful person. But is deceived. Strong emotions. Judas had strong remorse. He was really sorry. Don't believe that Judas was a person who didn't really care about. He was just wicked to consent to Jesus' death. No. He believed that he could pull off a trick. That's what he believed. And when he saw that Jesus was going to be killed, he couldn't take it. He was so sorry that he said, boy, death before dishonor, he couldn't face up to it. Strong emotions. Pain, one of those strong emotions. Fear, another one. If we are fearful of things, the devil can use fear of us. If we're fearful of losing our jobs, fearful of losing our wives, fearful of losing our family, fearful of losing friends, that's a problem. Shame. You have done something and so you are so ashamed. You can't face anybody. You believe that, boy, you're going to be crucified. I can't face them, I can't face them, I can't face them. And some people end their lives out of shame. They can't face to say, boy, this is what I did. I did this bad thing. Shame. So they rather take their lives. And some of us, we take our lives spiritually. Not physically, but spiritually. Because we did something and we don't believe that we can be restored out of that. That strong sense of shame. And yes, we ought to be remorseful when we do the things that are bad. But unlike Judas who took it too far and said, boy, death before dishonor, we ought not to think about that. Resentment and a lot of strong emotions. Some people just can't take an next person. The person might have done you something. You were kind to this person and you always see to this person's welfare, but now the person is in a state now where they believe that they're better off than you and they're giving you the cold shoulder, whatever the case may be. So you feel this sense of resentment against a person because the person has done you something so wrong. And we might have a sense in which we catastrophize from things to say, is the worst thing in the world that you could have done, you have done. So whatever it is, maybe it's something not so bad, but we have a mentality that says, what is the worst thing? This is the worst thing that you could have done. And we just resent. Strong emotions, again, love. People do a lot of things out of love. You remember, I suspect that you're familiar with it. This lady who was in love with a gentleman. But the gentleman said, no, I want you and not your children. The lady said, boy, I can't afford to lose you. So she decided, and she drove the car off the road into a lake and killed her, I think it was 2 children, if I remember well. All in the name of love. Strong emotions. Brethren, I'm saying to us, and I'm saying to us, I'm saying to myself, I'm saying to you, strong emotions. Whenever you experience these strong emotions, and this is just a sample of these strong emotions, whenever you are experiencing strong emotions, be very careful, because that's a way that deception can work. Remember we talk about deception in good? Because in the law, that was intended to bring righteousness. Sin corrupted that, so that the law brought death. We read that in Romans 7, I think. Paul said, oh wretched man that I am, because the things that I want to do, I'm not doing it. But the things that I don't want, that's what I find myself doing. Even the good can be corrupted. Our strong emotions, we have to be careful of our strong emotions, because it can lead us astray. Many times a person will say to you, whenever you find yourself getting angry, count to 10. We've heard the term, count to 10. And those of us who drive, I don't know how much is a problem over here, but in Jamaica, our drivers are not so careful as your driver over here in some respects. They will come to the traffic light and they will come and pull up and cut across you. They go in the turning lane and pretend that they're turning and just cut across you. And you're there, waiting to move off, and there could be an accident. And so on, the bad driving. You can get really angry and so on the road and so on. But strong emotions. Because people have killed other persons by bad driving. A person bad drive them, they felt angry that, who are you to do this? And they come out of the car and they shoot them. Can lead us astray. Strong emotions. But also another deception is a sense of security. We can be deceived in a sense of security. And what that means is that we believe that we are standing. Remember the Bible says, be careful you say who you stand, lest you fall. We believe that we are standing and we are right in our own eyes. That is why in looking a little bit later on at how we can avoid this, I will make the point that it is important for us to develop an attitude in which we can take criticism. If we can't take criticism, it's going to be difficult for us. Remember I said, we are going to be wise in our own eyes. And everything is going to be right. But maybe somebody else will see something that we don't see. But if we believe that the person is only there to tear you down, or the person there is only there to do you bad, it's going to be difficult to be corrected. A sense of security. Remember Matthew 13 and verse 24, the parable of the wheat and tares. We know it, I believe, so I don't have to go to the text. I'm just referencing it here. But the wheat and the tares, they look alike. They look alike. You can't tell the difference until it reaches the stage where it is to be harvested. That's the time. But growing up, it just look alike. Can't tell the difference. Jesus said, let the wheat and tares grow together. Because in trying to take up the tares, you might pull up the wheat because they look alike. And we can, and I said, we believe that we are doing well. We would mark ourselves 100 out of 100. That is part of the deception. So this is not something in which we are to despair our salvation, but we always are to be on the alert that we don't presume that we are standing, or we can find ourselves that we are out. And the last one that I would like to talk about is a deception in all the above that I talked about, in all the other 6 I talked about. Direct opposition, I talked about that. Deception clothing truth. Deception clothing good. Deception stemming from pressure. Deception in strong emotion. And deception in a sense of security. These, sometimes all can combine, or many can combine to give a deadly cocktail. You remember the case of Job? He heard that boy, I think his son died first. I don't remember the order. But after a while, it was just one problem after another. And it seemed as if all the problems in the world came down on him. Even his very skin, he lost his skin. He was sick and so on. And on top of that, rather than having friends who would sort of help him, those friends were of no help to him. Because all the friends were saying to him, man, you did something wrong. You must have done something wrong. That's why God is punishing you. And so he's getting psychological punishment from his friends. So he had all the cocktail mixed together. But yet still Job stood. Job stood. We can have all of these, brethren. But we have looked, I think, extensively at deception and to see the ways in which we can be deceived. We have looked at the devil, how the devil can deceive us, the world is against us, and our very nature is against us. But now I want us to explore some hard saying. In light of all of those, how easy it is to be deceived, and the fact that we do not know when we are deceived. I want us to look at some hard sayings. Because in exploring these hard sayings, we are going to see whether or not we are going to have a gauge to gauge ourselves in terms of how we are doing in terms of the earlier texts that I've talked about and the other points I've talked about. I want us to turn to Luke 14. Luke 14. Luke 14. I want to explore some hard sayings of Jesus Christ. It says in verse 25, large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and his children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be his disciples. Cannot be my disciple. If you do not hate your father and mother, husband and wife, children, even your own life, I want you to look at this saying, because this is one of the hard sayings of Jesus. Do you believe that this was an exaggeration, or is it meant to be taken literally? Is it a hard saying that is literal and should be taken literally? And we understand that hate means, not hate in the way we understand hate, but love less. We should have our wives and our family, our friends, and even our own life. We should value it less than obeying God. Is what is saying an exaggeration? You know, sometimes we might say to our children or somebody, I've told you 1,000 times not to do this. But we don't literally mean 1,000 times. We mean that we have said it several times. Maybe it's just 5 times, but we exaggerate. Is this exaggeration what Jesus is saying here? We have to love less. Father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sister, even our own lives. No, I think we're beginning to see the difficulty in trying to reconcile this hard saying with what we have said before in terms of how easy it is for us to be deceived. Because when it is to go against our mother, our father, that's an easy thing. Because our parents have grown us and we have known them, they have loved us and so on, and to go against them, that's an easy thing. I go against family. A family might say, if you're coming to this church or whatever it is, I'm going to disown you. You're not going to have any inheritance, whatever the case may be. You might have spouse who don't necessarily like the church. The church is too small. The church, that's at the church. I'm not into that. But it says that you must love God more than your spouse. And you know, sometimes we might be in a difficult situation when we are dependent on our spouse to help us out in some things. We can't afford to lose this wife. I've had my wife for 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. And to lose her now, boy, can't afford to lose her. I prefer to lose salvation. I don't think we say it literally that way, you know. But in terms of the decisions that we make, when it comes between loving God and loving wife, husband, etc., family, where does God fit into all of that? Luke 14 and verse 33. Same Luke 14. In the same way, any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. So we are asked to give up everything. Now you begin to see how difficult it is when some of the things that we treasure, some of the pleasures we treasure, some of the pain that we want to avoid, it conflicts with God, God's way. We begin to see how easy it is now for us to say, this is not meant to be taken literally. This is just a hyperbolic expression. This is just exaggeration to make a point. Matthew 8 is our next text. Matthew 8, our next text. And verse 21. Matthew 8 and verse 21. Another disciple said to him, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. But Jesus told him, follow me and let the dead bury their dead. Imagine, it really sounds insensitive, isn't it? Doesn't it sound insensitive? You have a father. And you are probably one of the leading person, if not the main person, who is going to look after it. And Jesus said to you, listen to me, man. Just leave everything, man. Just follow me. Don't even bother go back and bury your father. It sounds very insensitive. Very insensitive. Difficult. Jesus said, no, man. Don't even worry, go back and bury your father. Just come with me and forget about everything. Forget about family. Forget about everything. Hard sayings. Matthew 10 and verse 34. Matthew 10 and verse 34. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against his mother, a daughter-in-law against his mother-in-law. A man's enemy will be enemies of his own household. You're beginning to see how difficult it is when we have these hard sayings that God requires of us. And why it is that the word says this? Because sometimes we will have to go against our own spouse in order to please God. We're going to have to go against family in order to please God. It's hard. It's tough. Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, we're going to have to go against them. People who we love. People who we spend years with. People who we're close to. We are emotionally bonded with them. But we have to look and say, no, I can't do this. It is against God's way. It's going to be difficult. Remember, we talk about emotions. We are wired to avoid pain and to embrace pleasure. The pleasure of the person's company. We are going to be alienated. We're going to be alienated from friends. I have come to bring, not going to bring peace. I've come to bring separation. And not that God hates family and so on. God is for family. But when the family or friends or whatever comes between God, it's going to be hard to choose. Many have not made the right decision. Remember I said, just as last week, I said, it is not that God's power is lacking. It is the decisions we make will determine whether or not we make it. John 6 and verse 53, I think we know this text. Jesus said, a man ought to eat his flesh and drink the blood. The disciple says, this is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? Because the Jews were told not to drink blood, not to eat human flesh. But he said that Jesus was saying that you had to do that in order to enter the kingdom. The person said, man, this is a hard saying. Many fall away after that. It was too hard. Too hard. Too hard. But I want us to look quickly at some examples, practical examples. I've alluded to some. Sacrificing to attend the feast. You are not going to get the time off to attend feast. The boss says to you, boy, I really can't afford for you to go to the feast this year. I can't give you the full days. I can give you 2 days. Or maybe if you wait next month, I can give you the time next month. But no, I'm not going to be able to give you this time. If you go, your job will not be here. You need to look at another job. What would be your response? This is how it will play out for us in the real world. Whether or not we are going to say, boy, I thank you for all the years that I have worked with you. I thank you for giving me a job. I was able to provide for myself and my family and so on. But I must obey God rather than man. I am afraid I will not be able to stay because I am bound by the Bible to be at God's feast. Or are you going to say, God is good? And this, I might be able to come back from this. This is not the only sin that I have done. Just as the other sins that I've done and gotten forgiveness, this is one that I also will get forgiveness from. And perhaps it's true. Perhaps it's true. But perhaps at the feast you might hear a message that would resonate with you. and bring you back from deception. It's a difficult thing. I know many have lost their job round about at the feast time. I don't know this year a number you were able to attend. I don't know if anybody lost their job as a result of having to go to the feast. But it's a trying thing. What do you do in that? This is a hard saying. What do you do? Walking off a job. Or avoiding certain relationships. Avoiding lust or some immoral relationship. Oh, the lust or the immoral relationship will ease the pressure. Pressure is on. Remember we talk about pressure? It will ease the pressure. Some persons, I don't know anybody here, but some persons getting up into age and so on. I want to get married, but I don't see any prospective husband or wife and so on. What am I going to do? These are the difficult choices that we make. The hard sins. Earlier I talked about opposing a spouse. It can be difficult. It can be difficult. This is one of the problems that organizations, not just the church faces, but organization faces. Because it can bring problem. Or it might be protecting a loved one. It might be in the area of protecting a loved one. Let's say you believe that some loved one was unjustly treated. But the person didn't deserve that. But they were treated with disrespect. They were treated in a bad way. And you want to protect your loved one, whether or not husband or wife or children and so on. You want to protect them because they were treated with injustice. They were not meted out with justice. And so you are on a crusade now for justice. In all of that, I'm not saying that you ought to tolerate injustice. But remember I talk about strong emotions. That sometimes when you're going after that, you can be. Because a lot of people, in the interest of justice, have done a lot of terrible things. In the interest of justice. And justice is a good thing. Justice is a good thing. But in pursuing justice, we might find ourselves inflicting more than is necessary. I think you will remember God punishing a nation. The children of Israel disobeyed, and God used a Gentile nation to punish them. But God said afterward, no, you have gone too far now in administering justice. You have taken upon yourself as if you are having pleasure in inflicting pain. You can't go too far. So even in protecting loved ones, we have to be careful. Because we can find ourselves on the wrong side of the equation. Another area that I think that we can be tested in is study, ambitions and promotions. I know that in Jamaica, most of the work persons who are working, most of the programs for degrees and advanced degrees, they are offered on Saturdays, or Friday evenings, Saturdays, and so on. So in order for you to qualify, and particularly in this harsh job situation here now, where you might want to edge up a bit, you want to get yourself more marketable, some of the courses are only available on Saturdays. What do? Do you attend those courses? And like the Seventh-day Adventist says, once you come to church, there's nothing wrong. So you make sure you go to the school, before 2:30. That in the morning you start at maybe 10 and you finish at 12, or have good time to come to service. These are the areas in which we are going to be tested. Or what if we are out of a job right now, and the only job that's available is a job someplace where there's no church to support us, and we are to behave as we are going to be like a Lone Range Christian. There's no church services, no brethren nearby that we can talk with and fellowship with. We are left by ourselves to fend for ourselves. We are isolated from our congregation. But the job is good. Pay good money, and boy, they are about to seize my house now. I can really do with that money to save my house and my family. These are hard choices. Hard sayings. Remember what I said, that we are wired to avoid pain. Nobody likes pain. We will tolerate certain level. After that, it's going to be too much. This is the problem that we face. And the thing with it is that whenever we are sliding into deception, one of the things that happens, whenever a person is under pressure and is going to break, one of the first things that goes through the window is truth. One of the first things that goes through the window is truth. So you might want to take up that job someplace, I don't know where, but someplace where there's no church, no fellowship, no spiritual support. And you say to yourself, no man, I don't want to go to this church, man. There are too many hypocrites in this church. Everybody's a hypocrite. They are not loving people. And you find all sort of fault with the church. They say, well, boy, these persons are not good people. All sort of faults. But the real issue is not the hypocrites that are in the church, but you're wanting to take up that job somewhere else. And oh man, I can play some tape. I remember we said, that their deception is good. Playing tape is good. Playing tape is a good thing. But the thing with when you're by yourself and playing tape is that you choose the tape that you want to listen to. So you're not going to choose a tape that is going to cause you pain. You're going to choose a tape that says, oh man, you're good, you're God's people, God is going to come back and usher into his world and all of these nice things. And you're going to just powder puff yourselves. These are the pressures that all of us face. And as I say, it's not just for you. It's just for me as well. And I have to look to myself because I can be deceived as well. Whenever the pressure is on, truth is the first thing that is sacrificed. Truth. First thing that is sacrificed. Deception, clothing, truth. So we're going to look for the good and to look at those good that is common to both. And to say these are the important things and to leave out the others. But I want us to turn now to the last section in which we look at how we can defend ourselves against deception. How can we defend ourselves from deception? The first thing is to keep an open mind. That's the first thing. Keep an open mind, meaning that you are always open to the possibility that you can be wrong about something. Whatever it is. Maybe a decision that you are going to make, maybe it's a theological position that you have held for a long time. Always be open that you can be in error. And as humans, we generally reject the information that conflicts with our belief. So our current belief is this, and whatever information that conflicts with that, we are going to set it aside. That's human tendency. And we are humans. As much as we are spiritual, we are humans. And so we are going to find ourselves wanting to just hear the side that supports our position. But the thing is, always, whenever there is an issue, always try to find somebody else who is going to give an opposing position and bring the two together. Look at it. That's why we say that if you can't take criticism, it's going to be difficult because you're going to be right in your own eyes. Always important. Open mind. So that you say, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But this is how I'm seeing it. A person might say, I really didn't think of it that way. I believe it is more this way. And from that, you can look at the opposing view and then you'll be able to come to a correct view. But if you believe that you are right and that's it, and you can't be deceived, you are going to be in danger. Keep an open mind. First thing. The second thing is to keep in mind that God can use bad situations to teach us particular lessons. Sometimes the situation can be bad, but don't believe that's the end and God is, why me, Lord? Why I'm going through all of this thing? Why you giving me all of this thing? What wrong I've done? And you begin to catastrophize from that. To say, why me? Why me? Why I'm going through all of these problems? Peter talk about the pain before the glory. Peter talk a lot about that. Paul in 2 Corinthians 12 and verse 7 to 10, you don't have to turn there. But Paul said that I was given a thorn in the flesh, to let me know that God's grace is sufficient. That sometimes when we're going through bad patches, bad times, don't give up. Because maybe it's God's way to teach us certain lessons. To say, what is the lesson, God, you're trying to say to me right now? It's not that God hates us or God is against us. Because sometimes we can believe that God is against us. As the children of Israel, when they didn't have food and water, they rebelled because they believed that God didn't love them, that God took them there only to punish them. That boy, it would have been better for us to be in Egypt. Why you bring us into this desert here now? You build up our hope, taking us out of Egypt. You bring us into this desert now, and now you're going to kill us. But believe that God, even in difficult cases, He's trying to teach us certain lessons. The third defense is to take a definite stance against the devil. James 4 and verse 7 make that point. Resist the devil and he will flee. Resist the devil. It's not to, as I use the example about the cat and mouse, to be tempting the devil, but to say, no, this is not God's way. I am not going to do it. To say no and be firm in your answer. Not to say a maybe, or, tell me some more, or whatever the case may be, but to say no. It is just like sometimes you go to the mall and you might be walking. I had to be going to the mall this week and, walking and a person is saying, come here, can you sell some of this? This is a good bargain, so on and so forth. If you are there and like maybe they find some way of getting to you to say, no, this thing is so good to you, man, this is good for you, this is good, this is good, this is good. And after a while you say, maybe, I think I might try it. And after a while they find some way of telling you, this is a bargain. You're going to love it and all of these things, and you get hooked in their sales pitch. But if you say, no thank you, and you move on, they're not generally not going to press you. Or if they come again and you say, no. But if you're saying, look with them, maybe, they are going to get you. And you find yourself spending more than you should. I think a little bit of that happened to me in the shopping thing. I was looking at some products. I said, perhaps it was a little good to have this. I know that the money was a little bit short, but I said, maybe I can make it up somewhere. So, I actually, rather than say no to it, not that I needed it right now, I think this has some value. But in saying no, because I did say no to some others and they stopped. But the example is important, that we say no and mean what we say no. Not a no in which we are giving mixed signal, but a definite no. The fourth defense is self-sacrifice. That's the only way. Or else we are going to avoid the pain or embrace the pleasure. And therein we will be led astray. Spirit of self-sacrifice. Jesus demonstrated that. As I say, in his temptation, after an exhaustive day, 40 days and night of fasting, the devil came to tempt him. When he finished, he was exhausted. He said, listen to me, I'm not going to obey the devil. Scripture talk about Jesus was obedient even unto death. That's what it means. That even if it's going to cost us, even if God's obedience to God is going to cost us our life, we have to be willing to pay it. That's what this means. In that case, no, we have developed an immunity against pleasure and pain. Because those are the lures that really tug at us. But if we say to ourselves that I am willing to die, as Paul said when they were going to restrain him from going to Jerusalem, I'm ready now to die for Christ. Unless we have that self-sacrifice spirit, it's going to be difficult. Self-sacrifice spirit is important. The fifth thing that I believe is we should avoid presumptions about God's will. Avoid presumption about God's will. So sometimes we just say, well, boy, if it work, it work, and so on. We don't think about it. We don't get counsel. We just presume that God is going to save us. Jesus was tempted by that. Throw yourself down, man. And God will not let anything happen to you. He will send his angel to catch you so that you don't fall. And all of these nice texts. And the text is there that he quoted. But he would have presumed on God's will. And so he would have sinned. Many times we find ourselves presuming on God's will without getting information that, boy, is this God's will for me in my life, where I am right now? Whatever I'm doing, is this what God wants of me right now? But we say, oh, it's God's will, man. I feel it. I know it. I feel it in my spirit. And all of these nice things. Remember you talk about emotions? I feel it, man. And you can't convince a person, who is in that frame. Presuming on God's will. The sixth thing is, don't let strong feelings drown out the voice of God. Strong feelings can really drown out God's voice. We feel so strongly about a thing in which nobody can talk to us. Not even God can talk to us when we are so strong, when our emotions are so strong. Not even God can talk to us because we're going to drown out his voice. Anger, maybe resentment, all of these strong feelings, love, whatever it is, they can really drown out God's voice. We are too caught up with it, with things, can really drown out God's voice. So remember, whenever an occasion comes in which you have this strong feeling, because sometimes people will tell you that about what? Temporary insanity? You've heard the term temporary insanity. People claim that, boy, it's just like something took me over and I went insane for a minute and I killed a person and so on. It's not my normal manner, but I was temporarily insane. And maybe we plead temporary insanity sometimes for ourselves. That's a defense strategy to get off murderers. That, he just snapped right there. Temporary insanity. Be careful with those strong feelings. They can lead us astray. Whenever we're feeling strong, always be willing to go through. Revisit, look at it, get advice, get counsel. Restrain from taking impulsive decisions because they can really hurt us. The seventh and final is found in Ephesians 6 and verse 11 to 18. I won't read it. I think you know it. Constant use of the full armor of God. Constant use. Not just occasional use, but constant use. Keep on that armor of God. The belt of truth. Remember we talk about truth, that even in truth we can be deceived because just a little error mixed in it can deceive us. The breastplate of righteousness. Our feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel. The shield of faith. Faith is important. Remember we said that's what the children of Israel lacked. That they didn't exhibit faith. They exhibited unbelief. And so they were not able to make it in. The helmet of salvation. The sword of the Spirit. Always yielding ourselves to the Spirit. And it says, pray in Spirit always. Prayer always. That's a communication to God. It reassures us that we are His. That we can make it. That God is not against us. That whatever the difficulty that we are going through, even now, or we should go through sometime in the future, that God is not going to abandon us. Scripture says that to us. Brethren, I say to all of us, as I close, that we ought to be very careful that we are not deceived by the devil, because he's out to get all of us. He's not willing that anyone should be in God's kingdom. He has set up a rival kingdom that is similar to God's, but is completely out of sync with God's kingdom. We have to be careful because he has the world against us. He has worked against us. Even ourselves are against us. And that's an important thing for us to remember. That sometimes don't believe that we act in our own best interest always. Sometimes others will have to save us from ourselves, as Moses and Aaron did. Remember also that the devil uses various ways to trick us. that he can be transformed as an angel of light. He can use truth to deceive us by mixing a little error. He can use good to deceive us by accepting things that are good but not good enough. He can use several things to deceive us. Brethren, be on the watch for this devil, because he really can deceive us. And one of the important things I'm going to implore all of us to do is to try and be our brother's keeper. And sometimes it's going to be difficult. You might be talking to somebody and they're not hearing, they're not listening, but the important thing, don't stop. As one person, I was listening to a radio program, and the person said that they had a problem with eating disorder. And family members and friends would always say, no man, you ought to eat and keep his weight up and so on. They always thought that they were too slim, and so they would eat and go and pass it out and so on. But she gave her testimony after she recovered, and she said, you know what? When I was hearing all of those encouragement, even from person who I thought that they were not for me, because some person would talk to me, I didn't believe that they really loved me or care for me. But she said she don't know how to explain it, but over time, the weight of those seed of faith that was sown was able to save her. And she gave her testimony how, even though it didn't make a difference immediately, but he had sown a seed of hope that was able to save her. I'm saying, brethren, to all of us, that we ought to look out to ourselves and be our brother's keepers in all of this, because all of us are in the struggle. I hope, brethren, that all of us will take to heart these words. Thank you very much, and God bless you.